Book 3. The Council of the Ages. Chapter 3. He was a misunderstood monarch, perhaps because of what? Of his reign for men. As for the elves are considered by most to be a hero who made everything possible to preserve his kingdom and his people. The Life of a Mistral 18. Author, Piolglena Esmernial. Paulana was in one of the towers on the southern border. She didn't have to stand guard, but there she was contemplating the scene. For the last 4 years after her degradation she had been stationed on the northern frontier patrolling the dull marshlands of the Eternal Mist. A sparsely inhabited place that had a minimum number of soldiers. She spent weeks alone in an abandoned fort with only the company of a dog and many cats. And the incredible thing is that she did not miss life at all at court or with her comrades in the Knights of Elen. For her it was a liberation. But by surprise he received a letter ordering him to return immediately to Bordalania by direct order of Prince Inrich. Leaving the tranquility of the swamps was a shock. He still did not understand the reason why they had ordered his return. When he arrived he only found many rumors. The only certainty is that the Council of the Ages had been convened, something unheard of, but that was not the most incredible thing, no. The king was going to allow some orcs to set foot in the Palace of the Heavens again, a real disgrace for all the elves. The Nyarak were coming back and that was quite a provocation. And there she was watching as the best Knights of Elen, commanded by Inrich, received the strange guests, who were guarded by Ziranak. The truth is that they seemed to be prisoners rather than illustrious guests. The world is sinking into its own feces. The elf commented bitterly as she watched the scene. Ziranak must be holding back the urge to kill them, she thought to herself. Dalaran, Paulana. 2 knights greeted the elf, but she did not answer them as she was focused on the extraordinary fact of seeing orcs in her elf kingdom. Ziranak was able to arrive to receive the Nyarak. One of them commented. Paulana looked at the knight in surprise. The elf explained. He had just arrived from the Shadow Mines. There was a great attack on the mines. The king had no choice but to send his best knights. Nobody knows. The king does not want it to be known that he has a very serious problem in his own territory. From what it seems Ziranak got a great victory. Stufos will no longer be a problem, for the time being. Ziranak is Elen's best knight, the king's favorite. He was so superior to the rest of the warriors that even Inrich accepted his position. The Stufos never beat each other definitively, they always come back. Paulana commented. You should keep in mind, Inrich has you lined up, Paulana. Look for a place there. The elf was silent. The other knight continued talking. He seemed to be amused by the matter. You don't know. He has called you to see if he can provoke you. Look for a mistake of yours. He can't get even with Ziranak, so he looks for something to entertain himself with. Nazeball. First the Nyaraks, now Inrich. Let him send me there. At least I'll die with dignity. I won't be here like the 2 of you, licking his ass for millennia. The 2 elves laughed out loud at Paulana's words. You're capable of that. If, on the first occasion, I will make him happy, I would rather die than endure in this place. Well, you're going to have an opportunity that is not even noticeable. What do you say? Enrich is going to send a select group of Elen's knights to the great banquet and wants them to sit next to the Nyarak to keep an eye on them. The other gentleman continued his companion's story. He did so behind the backs of the king and Zinirak. Inrich has chosen those gentlemen he holds in the least esteem, as an insult. That's why he brought you here too. You will be one of them. Me? To sit next to some Nyarak? The elven knights laughed at Paulana again, relieved that they would not be the ones who would suffer such an insult. And beware of doing something. The order of the great king is clear. No matter how disgusted we may be with them, we should treat them with all the courtesy possible. Paulana punched a stone. They were the cause of her brother's death, and Enrich put them next to him, quite a provocation, because he would fall into the trap. If what awaited him in life was to be the prince's toy, the game would soon be over. Without saying goodbye to his two companions, he descended from the tower. There he met his captain, who told him an order he had just received. Paulana was to report to the Palace of Heaven as soon as possible. Prince Enrich was calling for her services.
The company of the Blue Phoenix spent a long time contemplating the plain of paradise. Its fame was fully deserved. That lush vegetation, the grass merged on the horizon with a blue sky full of cotton clouds as far as the eye could see. Along the plain, like drops of oil on a surface of water, clusters of tall trees appeared, where under their shade were built a series of beautifully designed houses. The breeze brought a scent of roses and mint that flooded everything. But they were not alone, they were waiting for them. There, as soon as they put the first hoof of their horses in Bordelania, an elf company on horseback was waiting for them. It was not just any company. It was the best knights of the Order of Ellen, who were waiting for their comrades in arms. The company was dressed in its best clothes and presented combat formation. Before their guests, they showed themselves with all their power as a warning. From among them approached the person who seemed to be in command of the company. The elf knight bowed to Ziranak. "There is Amhar Enrich. Woma." They spoke in High Elf. The common language was used by everyone in Shan Ares. It was supposed to be the language taught by the gods, with its variants and dialects, to all their children, although that does not mean that there are no other languages such as that of the elves, orcs or dwarfs. But it was usually discourteous not to speak together in the presence of foreigners. Although the group was already used to the continuous rudeness of the elves towards them. You didn't have to be a polyglot expert to know that the elf knight's name was Enrich, and a little knowledge of the elven royal dynasties of Shan Ares was enough to know that he was the youngest son of the king of Bordelania. Enrich observed the group of mercenaries, and despite possessing a beautiful look, mostly thanks to large slanted grey eyes, they could not hide the total contempt he had for all of them, but in particular for Aras, Damian, Ahitame, Syrian, Baban, all Embionic. The elf commented to his knights. Gosberg and Loranthas opened their eyes when they heard that. Aras, who was not exactly stupid, knew that those words were directed at him. Even Ziranak disapproved of the elf prince's words, though he remained silent. "It'll be troll shit," Denka grumbled. Enrich heard that, who turned to look at the Denka. The situation was beginning to get tense again. Many put their hands to the hilts of their weapons. Arian grabbed Aras' hand so that she would not draw her sword. "Enrich is enough," Ziranak ordered. "We have orders that we are going to carry out." The call to order from the first knight of the Order of Ellen calmed things down, and after a pause the group began to ride again. Resuming the march caused a drop in tension. The mercenaries should keep calm in this place. After a long time of walking, Arian managed to get to Gosberg's side. What did the elf say? He tried to speak in the lowest tone he could. The Denka smiled slightly and looked at the priestess with some condescension. They already had the father's head, now they could have the son's. Arian was perplexed. She did not expect such great contempt, and she got angry. "I should have killed him right then and there," the Denka muttered. They continued the march. Aras was not someone who was well received in Bordelania. He was one of the architects of the fall of the kingdom of Tortanel at the hands of the Black Empire, the most disastrous news for the elves in the entire Age of the Damned. Surely in Bordelania, there were many refugees from the ancient elven kingdom of Darsuk. Aras didn't expect a different reaction either, as they had sacked Tortanel to the ground to make it an imperial province. But the elves took their revenge the following year, at the Battle of the Gorge of Tioras, slaughtering the Black Legions and carrying the head of their father, Arakabaras, to be hung inside the throne room of the great king of Bordelania until it rotted completely. So the presence of Aras was already an element of tension for everyone, and the fact that he came along with his orc cousins. Even Agnorok, who was not so attached to orc traditions, was also quite upset. Everyone knew the story well. There had been no presence of orcs on the plains of Paradise for a long time. Since they were expelled at the conclusion of the Shadow Wars, when they were defeated by the elves. The orcs were massacred, fled desperately, and had to seek a new accommodation in the south. On a new continent, Darsuk, they found a new home in the Golden Plains, where they spent ages constantly fighting men and elves to survive. With the rarefied atmosphere, they advanced in silence through the plain of Paradise. Occasionally a bridge had to be circumvented. They crossed lush fruit fields and richly decorated farmland. The elves tilled the land without making any apparent effort. At the end of the plain, located on the horizon, the greatest work of all Shanaris could be seen, the Palace of the Heavens. Its great golden dome received them while the great waterfall fell into it. Arian had read a lot about the place, but now when he saw it in person he saw that no description or drawing did it justice. No one alive in Shanaris could build it, not even the best elven and dwarven craftsmen. It was a construction made by the gods, the most perfect construction that had ever been created. The company that was escorting them abandoned them when they arrived at the Palace of Heaven, which was a huge structure. The palace was the size of a city. The entrance to the palace was protected by a huge wall of golden stones. Agnorok was surprised. Bordalania was located in the middle of the continent, surrounded by allied kingdoms, with no enemies nearby. However, he had a powerful army and the Palace of Heaven was jealously guarded, as if an imminent threat was going to attack them. They were the center of attention of all those present from the beginning. Only Enrich and Ziranak accompanied them apart from a small crew of elven knights. They advanced through the interior of the palace. The numerous gardens inside the palace stood out. They were beautiful and lush, full of trees, and each garden could be considered the size of a forest. They did not go up or down any floor. They advanced through the main gallery of the Palace of Heaven. They were closer and closer to the dome and the waterfall. The area surrounding the dome was filled with statues of great elven kings that protected the entire avenue. Anyone who had read about the Palace of the Heavens would know how to recognize it without difficulty. It was the Avenue of the Kings. Each king of Bordalania had a statue in his honor. The avenue welcomed them with a statue of the current king, a Mistral 18. Although the elves were long-lived, the avenue was full of statues with streets that started from the main avenue. On this street the most important kings in the history of Bordalania were placed. The composition of the statues that decorated this avenue could depend on the king's criteria. What was never changed was the last statue, the first king of Bordalania, the great god Label, the creator of Shanaris. Label was the father of Elaban, Thani, and the other gods. And although everyone knew of his existence, for many of the mercenaries it was the first representation they saw of the great god. Since during the Age of the Damned, most of the original gods were forgotten, but not to the inhabitants of Bordalania, who considered themselves the favorite sons of Label, the protectors of Shanaris. They stood for a moment admiring the statue of the great god. He was powerful and staring blankly at the horizon. They resumed their journey to enter the interior of the dome. They called it the Room of Creation. It was immense, with the waterfall in the background, falling behind the throne. The room was full of people. There were great gentlemen present. The Council of Ages was assembled, which might explain the great security in the kingdom. They were greeted with absolute silence, only interrupted by the noise of the waterfall falling water. They walked and walked. Time seemed to stop. It became an eternity. In the end they reached the throne. The image they found could not be more curious. The great king was sitting on the throne. But even though the great king was quite tall, the titanic dimensions of the throne made him look like a small child sitting on a chair. The throne was so huge that even for someone as great as Sabu, it would fit comfortably. Kush proved that what the legends and myths said about the gods was true. They were true giants.
Accompanying the great king, Seated beside his throne on golden chairs were the other monarchs who made up the Council of the Ages. Behind them stood a huge entourage of secretaries, serfs and soldiers who watched the scene with some trepidation. The group came to stand in front of the great king. The elven knights knelt before the kings and bowed. The monarchs expected the mercenaries to make the same gesture, but they were left with the desire. The mercenaries did not flinch. Everyone remained silent in the absence of bows, an insult to the monarchs, but the mercenaries were free citizens and owed no vassalage to these kings. As he maintained his attitude, gestures of surprise and murmurs shook the area of the advisors. Outraged by the lack of education of the mercenaries, Arian tried to defuse the situation by advancing 3 feet and nodded his head, typical of Caesarea. The first to thank the reverence was the great king with a slight smile. Dalaran Arian, the priestess of the god Elaban. Shannari's smile. The light that illuminates us in these times of darkness that are upon us. Agnorak and Aris exchanged glances. The king of the elves certainly held the young woman in high regard. I, as Lord of Bordalania, custodian of the Hall of Creation, heir to the throne of Label, greet you and welcome you. Thank you very much, my lord. There was a pause. For a while everyone was silent, studying each other. It seemed that no one wanted to talk. In the end one person decided to break the silence. It was Ferdinand de Bussy, the now Grand Master of the White Robes and President of the Council of Magic Orders of the city of Tripulia. An old acquaintance of the mercenaries, protagonist of their adventures when they went in search of the triumph of Elaban. Now he wore an immaculate white robe with elegant ornamentation made of gold thread. He observed the mercenaries closely. Like many magicians, he kept himself very well despite the fact that he was well over 70 years old. It was always maliciously rumored that wizards should use undesirable magic to lengthen their lives, something they always denied. Necromancy and blood magic were totally forbidden by the Great Council. Welcome mercenaries from the Blue Phoenix Company to the Council of Ages. Ferdinand was accustomed to taking the initiative in most of the meetings in which he participated because of his prestige and wisdom. Moreover, it was much more comfortable for the other members of the council. The great mage knew the mercenaries. Do you know what this sacred meeting consists of? The mercenaries looked at each other. They knew something, but most of them had known about the existence of the council when they read the letter from the king of the elves. Kush stepped forward and answered the great magician's question. At the end of the Age of the Gods, wars were fought against the demons. The council was the alliance of all the races of Shanaris to be able to defeat them just before the departure of the gods. Excellent! The last time the council met was before the beginning of the Age of the Damned. The great King Roham defeated the demons of the Black Abyss with the help of the council. But this action, instead of freeing Shanaris, caused the appearance of the damned and the fall of Turkheimak. The mage had impressed the audience with the answer. It had been a long time since the beginning of the Age of the Damned, and few people remembered the commotion caused by the fall of the City of Blue Light and the Elven Kingdom of Iberine. Congratulations, but it is not entirely accurate. Surely you have read the Chronicles of Olbiana. They have a translation error. The great king was not called Roham, his name was Dermidial. Dermidial II to be more exact, the last monarch of the House of Roham. But it seems that in the translations to the common his name was lost or censored, who knows? Here the elves have more reliable records. Ferdinand pointed out, something he loved, although Kush's answer that except for that small mistake was accurate. Only the elves remembered well those dark times and how Shanaris was saved thanks to the mags who later founded Tripulia. We have summoned you here today, as there is a threat that may endanger the whole of Shanaris. The demons are going to return from the Black Abyss. Kush and Arian exchanged looks of surprise. The demons from the abyss are coming back. It was something they did not expect. The demons were defeated and locked up in Itzamir for a long time. I see that you are surprised, said the great king. Mortals have a very short memory. There are hardly any records of the early age, even the beginning of the Age of the Damned. Kush complained. The Elf King smiled. the men always forgetting their past. Demons cannot be destroyed, nor could the gods, so they created a great wall in Itzamir to prevent them from leaving that dark place. They always aspire to return to Shanaris, and to prevent this there is the Council of the Ages. Dermidial was chosen to close the great black door that communicates with the black abyss. He managed to close it, but unfortunately he was contaminated with the dark poison. Only thanks to the gods who used through the magicians all their power was the threat contained. And so began the Age of the Damned. By the curse of Turkheimak, Elaban was condemned to wander among mortals. By that same curse we elves abandoned men to their fate as punishment for their treachery. The human kings shifted uncomfortably in their golden chairs as they heard the High King of the Elves sentence against them. The Council of Ages is supposed to consist of the 4 primordial races, and there is not an orc sitting in the council. Perhaps the fault of the curse was not with humans. It was Gosberg who spoke in a tone of utter contempt to the King of the Elves. Most of those present were outraged at the words of the Denka, who has always had a great talent for angering any other living being. Orcs are not worthy to participate in this council. They must be exterminated. I jump an elf and get stuck in Gosberg. The protectors of Shanaris have spoken. The chosen ones of the gods. These chosen ones who under his care expelled the orcs from the place where the gods decided for them to live. Not content with that decision, they confronted each other, provoking a fratricidal war that almost destroyed Shanaris. And to finish off their great task, they convene a new council to save Shanaris from the demons and cause a curse that has lasted for more than 5,000 years, until this young woman has eliminated her. Come on, it's something to be proud of. Gosberg's irony was hurtful to every elf. Now a good one was mounted, the King of the Elves rose from his throne, many elves put their hands to their hilts. Gosberg's words were an insult to all elves. The kings again stirred in their seats, although they were more amused by the attitude of the little Denka, who had not really told a lie either. Other spectators who were irritated by Gosberg's cockiness cried out for punishment for his offensive words. I do not consent to that monstrance in my house. The King of the Elves was extremely angry. Then things got hotter, many of those present drew their weapons, except for Gosberg, who remained extremely calm. But despite the displays of violence, no one dared to launch an attack. Everyone knew his fame, and the truth is that no one wanted to be a victim of his deadly daggers. Your Majesty has lived too long. Arian knew the twinkle in the Denka's eyes all too well. He was thinking of throwing the daggers. He would kill all the kings before they had time to blink.
The young woman also observed Aris and Agnorak, their hands clenching tightly on the hilts of their swords. They wanted to kill the elves. They were orcs, they had it in their blood. But Kush didn't seem to be in control of his emotions either. He was concentrating on casting a spell. All it took was a small spark, and that would be a bloodbath. Then a blinding blue light emerged that left everyone speechless. Enough is enough. No blood will be shed during the council. Arian had activated the blue jewel in his hand, the priestess of Elaban showing herself with all her power to those present at the council. The priests of the god Elaban have been part of the Council of Ages since the First Age. For the first time since the Dark Wars, orcish blood enters this council again. It's not an insult to the elves, it's a triumph. The proof that all the inhabitants of Shanaris are united again against the threat of the demons of the Black Abyss. Arian showed everyone in attendance how powerful she was. The high priestess of Elaban, who had removed the curse of Turkheimak. He healed the sick and if necessary could wipe out an entire army, as happened in the Iron War. Everyone was reassured by the young woman's call to order. The King of the Elves smiled pleased, the others were surprised, they didn't expect to see such great power in Arian's hands. So be it, for my part everything is forgotten. The great king apologized, an unusual event. Arian also looked at Gosberg, who took it as if he had done nothing. I have nothing more to say. He added calmly. Arian gave him a reproachful look and shook his head, waiting for an apology. The Denka reluctantly began to speak. My apologies for my words. "O great king, I also withdraw my words about the great lords who rule the beautiful kingdoms of Shanares." Everyone was pleased with the apologies, but the Denkga kept talking. "I just want to warn you, I hope you are willing to make all the sacrifices necessary, no matter how hard they may be, to prevent the arrival of the black demons. If you don't, your great king head will end up cut off and inserted into a spear right here. And I'll laugh in your face." The great king this time didn't take the little Denkga's warning too badly. "We will do whatever is necessary to protect my people and Shanares." The Denkga smiled sarcastically. His last words did not cause the same shock to the audience, who took the Denkga's words as an eccentricity rather than a prophecy. Now that things had relaxed, the magician Ferdinand took command of the meeting again. "The Council of the Ages has been convoked, since in Tripulia we have discovered something that makes the intervention of this sacred meeting necessary. But I will not speak. I will give the floor to the wisest and most expert magician in the age of the gods and demonic wars. Anenko the Wise." At the end of Fedora's words, a tall and ungainly-looking wizard immediately joined in. He had a slow and clumsy walk. He reached the height of Ferdinand, who gave him the limelight. The magician thanked the gesture with a slight bow of his head. Then he took out a huge scroll from his robe and unrolled it. It was surprisingly long, so long that when it touched the ground, even a good chunk was still rolled up. Everyone was amazed. The magician cleared his throat with 2 huge throat clearings before speaking. "I will summarize this serious matter in a hurry, as dinner awaits us." The phrase was not intended to be a joke, but it amused the viewers, to Anenko's surprise. At the end of the Age of Heroes, the black door was opened in Itzamir, from where the 2 black demons came out from the dark abyss. King Dermidial II defeated them, but it was a short-lived victory, since shortly after the damned appeared in the city where this great hero reigned. Now, according to my calculations and Tobian's prophecy, which speaks of the return of the demons as soon as the damned ones disappear, if you do not reach Itzamir before a year, the black door will open again and the 2 black demons will return, devastating all of Shanares with their legions in a great war that will bring a black age and will end up dominating everything. Something that this council must avoid. And with that, the magician rolled up his scroll and disappeared. With these words the meeting was concluded. The king of the elves came down from his throne and approached Arian and the mercenaries. "This is the reason for our call, Light of Shanares. We need your help to prevent the darkness from returning to Shanares. The Council of Ages must meet again and go to Itzamir to stop the black demons. But we will discuss the details tomorrow after dawn in a more thorough manner. Now you must rest and eat since you have made a long journey. You are all invited to my house. In the evening we will hold a dinner of honor to celebrate the reconvening of the Council of Ages. And may our victory over the black demons lead Shanares into an age of light, and may it finally bring peace and happiness to all races living in Shanares, including the orcs." Applause throughout the room of creation. It was a promise that everyone wanted. Agnorik did not believe it. Too many centuries of war and grudges would not be forgotten so easily, no matter how much applause they gave, and only with the good words of the King of the Elves.